Now, to explore working with those API routes, let's go back to our standard index.js file. So to this standard homepage route, which is not an API route. And in there, I will add a basic form, which I'll not style in any way for the moment, where I then want to add an input of type email, let's say. And above that, a label where I say your email address with a HTML4 tag of email. And then here an ID of email for accessibility. And then I'll put that into a div just to kind of put this into its own block and force a line break thereafter. And then I'll copy that div and create another input with an ID of message, or let's name it feedback. The type here is text, however, and here we just say your feedback. And actually, let's use a text area. That's more realistic, I guess. So we have a text area with an ID of feedback, and let's say under a number of 5 rows. And then we add a button to submit that form, send feedback. If we adjust the homepage like this, and we reload just localhost 3000, we see this form here. Now it is ugly, you could add styling, but this is totally not about the styling. This is just a dummy form which I add so that I can show you how we can interact with API routes. We'll see a more beautiful example in the next course section when we apply what we learn in this section to our first course project. So here we accept the email address and some user feedback. And of course, when that button is clicked, the idea is that this feedback is sent to some database, for example, that it's stored in some database. Now, we shouldn't talk to a database from our front-end application. It would be kind of difficult to implement, and that would be difficult for a reason. Because it's highly insecure if we would try to add JavaScript code to this component to talk to a database. Because we would have to expose our database credentials in this front-end code for this. And that would be highly insecure. Attached you'll find an article and video where I talk about this in greater detail. So that's not what we want to do. Instead, that's the perfect scenario for an API route. We fetch that user input on the front end, and once the user then clicks that button, we send a request to that API route, so to our own API, and then in that API route, we could connect to a database. Because then there we can safely do so because the code written in the API route will not be exposed to the front end. It will not be exposed to our website visitors. So here we could securely talk to a database. And therefore now here in index.js, I now want to get that user input when the button is clicked and send a request. Now for this, I will work with references here to get references to my inputs. So I'll import useRef from React to use this ref feature. And then I'll set up 2 references here. The first one is for the email input. And then the second one thereafter is for the feedback input. Now, once we got these references created, we can assign them to our elements with the special ref prop. And that's just standard React code, has nothing to do with API routes. And here I'll then just point at the email input ref, and here I'll point at the feedback input ref. Now we need a handler for the form submission, so I'll add a function here, submit form handler, the name is up to you, where we get an event object automatically because I'll bind that to the onSubmit prop on the form, so it will be triggered when that built-in submit event is triggered, when that is fired. And then we get access to that event object, and we need access because here I want to call prevent default to prevent that browser default where the page would basically be reload it because the browser sends a request automatically. I don't want that browser behavior here. Instead, I want to step in and send the request myself through JavaScript. For this here, we can now extract the entered email text by reaching out to the email input ref, and then there, since it's a ref.current, that's always how refs work, and then .value, because in .current, a pointer at this input object is saved, and this input object, just as the text area object in JavaScript, always has a value property which holds the current value of those inputs. So it holds the value entered by the user. That's the entered email, and then we can also get the entered feedback, of course, by reaching out to the feedback input ref.current.value as well. Now we could add validation and check if the email or feedback is empty. We could do that here to then show an error message to the user, but I'll not do it here because it's not the focus of this section. Instead, now we got these two values, and we might want to send them to our API route here to then there accept them, extract them, and save them in a database. And therefore, in the next step, we will work on that API route.